didn't want to have a career in coaching, that there was still other opportunities and things within the sector that they could go on to do. And that's why the beauty of Greenhouse being that you had, at that time, I think there was 14 different sports. So, myself as a head coach for athletics, we had basketball coaches, table tennis coaches, football coaches, all these guys and girls that we brought together and said, look, you might be a table tennis coach. You're going to get this activity leadership framework. We're going to give you your table tennis qualifications, but we're also going to give you basketball and football and all these other quals that mean you're going to be one hell of a multi-sports coach. But we're also going to train you on social media, and we're going to train you on business acumen and all these different things. And particularly now as we move through, to your point, the Trailblazer was a brilliant moment for us where we could really feed into that and start to build a qualification that we wanted rather than just using something. We could actually have something that we can feel really proud of, which is ultimately now the community activator coach, and still build around it. I think, for us, that was absolutely game changing.
From Coordinate Sports, it's The Drive Phase, a show about sports founders, leaders, and experts, and the stories behind their business journeys. Our guest this episode is Gary Laybourne, CEO of the Coach Core Foundation, the charity that works with over 200 employers using the power of sport and apprenticeships to give opportunities to disadvantaged young people. During the episode, we discuss Gary's early life and experience coaching in different settings. Gary shares his challenges and learnings of launching and scaling the program, then transitioning into becoming a standalone charity. We hear at first hand how Coach Core was scaled from idea stage to now working nationally across 17 locations. Gary is also candid about his personal journey as CEO and the strategies he uses to be at his best and continuously improve. Enjoy the show. Okay, so I'm really excited today to be joined by Gary Laybourne, CEO of Coach Core. The foundation uses the power of sport and apprenticeships to change the lives of young people in challenging areas. Soon they'll be celebrating their 10th anniversary, and the foundation has worked with over 200 employers and over 700 young people. So welcome to the show, Gary.
Hi. Nice to see you, James. Thank you for having me on.
You too, mate. Yeah, thanks for joining us today and making the time. What we always do is go back to childhood to kind of give the listeners a little bit of context, let them know where you're coming from. I know childhood was kind of split across two areas, maybe different landscapes and similarities in certain ways. But you grew up early years with Brixton and then moved down to the South Coast. Is that right?
That's it. Yeah. So Army brat, basically dad's left. And yeah, we went to Brixton and then lived in the Cambridge Gardens estates in Kingston. So a little bit punchy as dad was trying to readjust to life on Civvy Street with no real qualifications, nothing really going on. Mum working, just sort of secretary jobs and things. So they chose to sort of 6 years old to try and find a better life for me and my little brother. And we went down to the West Country, and it's your stereotypical, I love it. I still call it home. I was there till I was kind of 21, 22. Beautiful place. Still, as I say, call it home. But Torbay, where I grew up, is the 18th most deprived ward in the country. It's your stereotypical postcards, beautiful place in summer, and then, pockets of deprivation.
You see that a lot with the coastal towns all over the world, probably.
That's right. Yeah. So, I don't claim to have anything in terms of it was a punchy upbringing. We were made bankrupt twice. There was, sometimes it was a real struggle for my parents. My dad wasn't around much, that kind of stuff. But, the later work that I'm sure we'll get onto that I ended up doing, I don't see myself as disadvantaged or anything compared to some of the challenges that some of the young people have faced that I've worked with and know of. So yeah, but that said, it was an interesting upbringing, but very quickly found sport, knew that that's what I wanted to do from the off, and basically focused all my attention on that, rightly or wrongly, because I spent a lot of time getting in trouble because of it. That's all I wanted to do. So
So when you say you found sport, was that kind of from from family or from school, or do you have like role models? And generally we always kind of find that theme where there was one or two people who kind of, not sliding doors, but really gave you kind of inspirational, came into your life at the right time, right place.
Yeah, definitely. I think what's an interesting thing, and again, it sounds like I'm slating him now because we've actually got a really good relationship and stuff, but my father was a PT instructor, incredible, obviously fitness freak through the army and stuff, and competed on a national level at gymnastics as well. But when he left the army, that struggle to adapt, what he basically had was PTSD, which I think he accepts now and stuff. It just meant that he just wasn't around. He would be out boozing if he wasn't working and stuff like that. So I missed what would have been an incredible person to help me and guide me and support me.
Was that at the time, you said PTSD, sorry to jump in there, you said PTSD, right. At the time, was that something that I guess wasn't recognised, or was it kind of just no one really knew what it was? It just, like you said, it wasn't around or whatever?
Yeah, my dad's from mining stock. He's a Geordie, mining family, that generation of army, as you say, every generation before them was tougher. So you just don't talk about those things. You know, I mean, when your best friend is shot dead and dies in your arms, men that he was a sergeant of his platoon and all that died on service in Northern Ireland and things, I mean, that's going to affect you, right? So, but he will be adamant that it didn't, and just you move on. That's the job that you sign up for. And was that things like sport are a waste of time. So what I now recognize and reflect on as I've got older is that he's basically been trying to sort of put me down the right path, and that education is more important. But I think it was the latter. He just did it in a really poor way. Like, again, his whole life was focused on the army, physical training. He was a boxing coach, competed at national level gymnastics. And I suppose through his way of thinking, it gave me nothing when I came out, so you should focus on education. And I think, you know, he did it in a really kind of aggressive kind of way, an assertive way, and just took no interest in anything that I was doing. Even when I started to have, you know, real success on the track and stuff like that, he never came to any races. There was nothing there for it. So it was a weird thing when you talk about influences. It almost made me, because of the kind of, I suppose, my stubbornness that matches his, but I then wanted to do more of it just to show him. So I actually now on reflection realized it was probably a positive. But the first real incredible role model I had two in quick succession. I had a brilliant PE teacher. I went to a school that was, you know, it was the school that you had nowhere left else to go if you got kicked out of that one. Basically, it was, you know, you didn't pass year 11.
No more safety nets.
Exactly, yeah. So it was an incredible sports school. So again, you know, I firmly believe in luck playing such a massive part in things. So I got to really express my character and find myself through sport, because that's what the school was amazing at, this melting pot of, you know, young people that weren't great educationally, or, you know, certainly some of us, but that we could have sport and things like that. So the PE teacher there was brilliant. You know, I'm fortunate that I've got to, in later years, thank him and still, you know, have connections with him and, you know, have a beer with him and stuff. And I've just sort of said how much of a role he played in my life, just in case 30, 40 years in the profession has beaten him up. But he very quickly realised, as much as football was my passion, he realised that, one, I wasn't probably as good as I thought I was at it, but more importantly, I wasn't getting tired when everyone else was. So he made the effort to get me into the local athletics club. And that's where at 14, 15, I found my coach, who even today is so forward thinking around his philosophy and how he encouraged the group to come together and instill that passion into me. So yeah, I just got two really super positive role models in my life that not only then encouraged that love of sport and nurtured the talent that I had for it, but critically, all the behavioural issues, the things that were going wrong at school at that time just disappeared. Once they kind of took me under their wing.
And you get that, I guess, we'll talk about athletics a little bit, but you get that kind of self-fulfilling circle then. Like you're performing better, you're getting the encouragement, kind of right. Maybe the things you're lacking elsewhere, you're getting that from sport and throwing yourself into it a bit more. Yeah. In terms of athletics, what did that look like back then? Was it kind of the level, you talking about English schools level, etc., and getting that kind of out of area competition, traveling, etc.?
Yeah, and it's funny, there was a piece on Athletics Weekly recently about how English schools is in danger at the moment. And it's lost New Balance as a sponsor, and you know, it might be up for jeopardy.
It's kind of the whole athletics at the moment, and UK athletics, and the whole setup is. We do a podcast just on that, I suppose. We could probably talk about the whole.
It breaks my heart. But to your point, James, I think that was one of the biggest things that I found. Like coming from team sports like football, enjoying a bit of cricket, stuff like that, but actually finding this sport that everything, you know, from my personality that I didn't realise I needed, but everything is structured and tangible, and you've got targets and things. You know, the buck stops with you and all those kinds of things. So it can be a brutal sport in that sense, but if that's what your character and makeup enjoys, it's amazing. And that's obviously why people love park runs and things like that as well. The English schools element, I very quickly got to kind of go and start competing at English schools and then getting representative stuff. And it was that ability to, for the first time, to leave Devon, to go as a young man and go and start to see other places in the country and make friends from other places and realize actually I've got some self-worth and I'm, you know, I can really sort of push on. And it really just then cemented my decision to want to leave Devon, to go back into London, try and get a better life, try at that time pursue a career in athletics and stuff as well. And that's why I ended up choosing to go to kind of St Mary's as well. So
yeah, I guess just to touch on it, I think a lot of the time people don't realise maybe what your dad was kind of talking about, those Olympic sports, those niche sports, to kind of make a living from it, it's really elite level, right? And there's not that much in between, so it's kind of a big drop off. Whereas potentially football, rugby, you might be able to play semi-pro, earn a little bit as you're going along. So it kind of, it's difficult. I'm from athletics background, only junior level, similar to yourself, but I always find it interesting because all of those kind of transferable skills that you learn, all the discipline and kind of the commitment and resilience you need for athletics, you can transfer over into, it's kind of a bigger impact on your career rather than, not saying team sports aren't, but what you need to do as an athlete, whether, like you said, dad was gymnastics, not a lot of funding in gymnastics, boxing, athletics, all those kind of sports. It is difficult to make a living, but the skills, I think, kind of what you learn gives a really big impact on your life moving forward. So, no, it's a good reflection. In terms of St Mary's, so you've gone there as a kind of junior athlete into university. Leaving there or through uni, did you have a kind of a vision or an expectation what your career was going to be? Did you go there or was it all kind of wholeheartedly, I'm going to make it as an athlete?
I think at the start that was the expectation because, again, to be very clear, I never got to a stage where I thought this is going to be a professional living for me based on what I was doing. I think it was because I'd risen so quickly. I'd come from kind of, no athletics background at all to only start stepping foot onto the track at sort of 16 and then starting to run times and do things that I think people were like, whoa, okay. And St Mary's, again, my academic background isn't great. I got a C and an E, I think, at A level, which wouldn't even get me anywhere close to St Mary's these days. But how things were back then, they were prepared to take a punt because I was already kind of punching at national level with certain things. Yeah. So I suppose on going into that, I thought, okay, I'm going to carry on this trajectory. I didn't have a great experience in my athletics career while I was there, sadly, down to a coach. So we flip over to the other side of the line and couldn't have been more opposite to my athletics coach at home. And I found that a real struggle. Where, again, if I reflect and I'm being honest, I didn't probably have the discipline that I needed to, that I certainly put in. And that learning then helped me as a triathlete later on in life. But certainly what that did give me was I'd started coaching back in Devon. I was helping out with like a local team and stuff that I just wanted to sort of help support that my brother played for. But when I went to St Mary's, I really discovered the passion for it, like loving helping the local primary school and helping to coach others. So it very quickly started to sort of shift to, I think that is where I want my pathway to be. I want to be helping others. I want to work in sport. I know it's all going to be in and around sport. And funnily enough, I had a conversation with one of our new starters about this on Monday. As ever, when you leave uni, if I had the opportunity to do something like Coach Corps now, I'd have bitten your arm off. I didn't want to go to university. I didn't want to do a degree. I didn't want to really do it. But I thought that's what you had to do to make it and be successful is go and do this degree route that's still a drum that people bang too loudly for young people.
What was it you studied, Gary? Was it like sports coaching, sports science?
Sport media.
Sport media.
So, yeah, I mean, I've taken a few pictures. That's about as close as my media training's ever been used. But the sport bit, I mean, I'm still a bit of a sports science geek. So to be fair, I have at least, unlike some of my peers that again came in because they were top level rugby players or whatever, at least I'm using my degree in some sense.
Yeah, tangible link in there, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But so I left there, as everybody kind of does, in debt. Worse for guys and girls these days. And I ended up taking a job in sports marketing and I hated it. Literally hated it. I was coaching on the side. And I remember so distinctly standing outside the door of the office at 5 to 9 and not walking through it until it was 9 o'clock. That's how much I just didn't want to be there, like kissing ass of people that I just had no respect for because they had no respect for anybody else. And I swore to myself, when I pay off the last of like the big credit cards and stuff, I'm going to just leave and go into what I love and do. And I'm never doing this again. I'm never going to get a job where I can't get out of bed and want to be embracing it.
Yeah, what was the reason for that? Was it just like company culture or particularly the role of it being like super commercial or whatever it be, if it's sports marketing? Yeah. What was it?
Yeah, it was probably all of that actually. I didn't like the people, which wasn't great. Everything was target driven, sales driven. And again, that's my problem, not theirs. It's, I know some people that thrive and love those things, but I just found this whole rung thing of being so disrespectful to the people that are just coming in. Yeah. And as I say, kissing ass of people that, they've made it hard for you just to, have a conversation with them because you were lesser and they knew that you wanted their business. And I just hated that whole culture. Because then in my evenings, I'm putting on a tracksuit and I'm going out with a group of kids that just adore me being there and I adore being with them and stuff like that. And I think that probably didn't help. And then, true to my word, I paid off the last of the credit cards 18 months later, obviously student debt and all that kind of stuff still running. But I quit the job on the Monday and, dropped about 60% of pay just to go and work in coaching and just do what I loved. And I swear to God, I was skipping to work for about a year at least.
Yeah, it must have been a big relief, I guess, off your shoulders as well, relief off your shoulders. Enjoying what you do is key. What was that then? Was that with, we're going to get onto kind of Greenhouse and we're talking about Greenhouse alum and talking about Jason as well, one of our previous guests show, but it wasn't straight into Greenhouse, was it? You maybe a couple of stepping stones before that?
No, a couple of stepping stones. So I worked for a private coaching provider that was working kind of in through schools, but they tended to be in half decent areas. There was some deprivation stuff in some of the recording contracts that we had, but most of it was fairly decent schools. But otherwise, I was working in academies and, development centers. I was helping professional footballers get faster with some of their sprint work,
Oh, nice.
Very much seeing a life for myself in the elite game and the elite side of things. And then...
So these are kind of commercial operations, obviously, like working with elite, but obviously being paid for, not funded by any foundations.
Yeah,
or funded
private coaching organisation is the day job, and then working in professional football club academies, working with sponsored groups of athletes and things as well. So little talent groups and stuff. So yeah, very much that kind of pro side of it, professional elite side of things. And then the main bread and butter job, that coaching provider, they basically folded. They stopped operations. The owner of that decided that he just wanted to go and earn more money in the old business that he was doing. And I found myself scrabbling for a job, and I took a 6-month stopgap job working at Greenhouse Charity that lasted nearly 7 years. And never say never, but that opened my eyes to two things. One, that actually I wasn't as good a coach as I thought I was. That quite simply, it forced me in my mid-20s to really reassess what good coaching is. Because for me to come in and teach someone how to do the start phase of 100 meters, and really that's my focus and priority on life, and yet they haven't eaten all day, or they've got someone waiting for them at the school gates that's about to stab them and stuff like that. I was thrust into this world of being a youth worker as much as I was a sports coach. So my priorities and what I deemed good coaching got completely flipped on its head at that stage. But also I realized how, not selfish, because I think that's being unfair to myself, but I realized that all I was trying to do was run away from my past. Slightly counselling session going on here, but I realised that it was slightly running away, and actually I had a story to tell as well, and I could relate to a lot of the challenges that some of these kids were having because of the background that I grew up in and things like that. So that had a massive effect on me, and I absolutely adored my time at Greenhouse. It taught me so many good things, and I went from a head coach through to coach developer, getting to work with people like Jace, taking ideas from other sports, really understanding what good coaching looks like. Every good coach will tell you they've not stopped developing, and Greenhouse gave such a good opportunity for that. And essentially that was the origins of where Coach Core was born as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that's the comparison of what you're doing before with the elite game, your reflections there. It was interesting for me to hear that kind of reflection on coaching practice, obviously with the elite game or the private sessions. All those children are kind of coming because they want to be there, or they want to. It's called coaching for competition or for performance, whereas the other sessions that you run in, yeah, they're going to enjoy it, but it might be that if it's in school, they might not want to engage, or they've got other things on their mind, right? It's not just about how can I be a better player, etc.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think that, that's such a good point, because again, that was a very short, sharp shock that I think a lot of this is a big problem, a big challenge, I would say, within the coaching industry still today. When you go and do your coaching badges, which for so many people is their way in to our sector, at grassroots and stuff, everybody on those assessments or on that course wants everybody else to pass. So you play the game, you do what someone says, everybody says stop, you stop, and stuff like that. Don't work like that with a group of kids that don't want to be there, right? You're going to get absolutely slated. So that preparation of what real life coaching is, yeah, it took a lot of development from me.
Yeah, and also as well, when you go through the badge, like through the levels of coach education, it might be changing, but as you're going through those levels, generally you're becoming more specialised and more kind of tailored towards the elite level, aren't you? You get level 3,
Right.
4, 5. Whereas probably to engage level 1 and 2, you're probably a better coach in that environment. Whereas we'll probably talk about qualifications moving forward, obviously with Coach Core, but on paper you might just be a level 2, but you're going to perform better in that environment with a group of 30 kids rather than a small group of two or three.
Yeah, and credit where it's due. Look, UK athletics, yes, there's some issues going on there at the moment, but actually I'm seeing that now. They're starting to put, why can't you be a level 3, level 4 expert in coaching children? Exactly. It doesn't have to be about coaching elites, to your point, this pyramid. It can be just being about a really good grassroots coach. It's just, why should that journey have to stop skill set wise at level 2, for example? So hopefully it's a changing environment now.
Yes, I mean, your time at Greenhouse, so you say you touched on the progression there, and obviously kind of you've had time on kind of frontline grassroots, and then you've kind of gone into developing the team. What was the kind of, I guess, the genesis of that Coach Core program in the early stage? I know was it a funded program to start with, just one of your kind of strands of programming from Greenhouse, or what was that?
Kinda, yeah. I mean, I'll split that in two. So Genesis was Greenhouse, for those that don't know, operate in a very, very different way to many other coaching providers that are out there. They approach a secondary school that operates in an area of disadvantage in London. They're just about to spread their wings, but to other cities. But certainly when I was there, and it's the school pays half the salary, you pay half the salary. But ultimately what that means is that you are there Monday to Friday, sun up, sundown, in holidays, there as a bigger brother, bigger sister, as much as you are a technical, hopefully high quality coach. So for me, working in New Cross, I'm dealing with some of the gang issues that are going on between Peckham and Camberwell and all these different things whilst trying to teach these guys different sports and encourage their sporting journey. The challenge being, though, is that you build up such an intensive relationship with those young people and understand them personally over the course of 5 years. You're not there just once every Tuesday after school. We're there for 5 years, day in, day out, speaking to them. And then at 16, knowing that some of them aren't great, the academic side of things, have a really challenging background that might steer them down the wrong path or whatever. And it breaks your heart because we just had to keep accepting that every May, June, that we're going to lose a group of people that we know are good kids. I can genuinely count on one hand in all of my years, the amount of kids that I just thought, they've got no future, like they are going to be in prison or dead. It's just the rest of them are just so misunderstood and just haven't been given an opportunity. So this bubbling away, then speaking to my peers and other coaches, where in our sector, as all too well, James, it's we've got really good, well-meaning volunteers, but they don't tend to stick around very long, or the assistant coaches will jump to another place for an extra £1 an hour or something like that. And it just was that light bulb moment of why the hell are we not having these young, relatable role models who love sport, love their local community, biggest misconception that they don't. Why aren't they our future workforce? And the right place, right time was that CEO of Greenhouse at the time, Mike, had just held the pen on a Centre for Social Justice paper off the back of the riots that said young people from certain backgrounds, look, walk, talk, come from a certain area, just won't improve their life chances if not given that chance. So that was picked up by the newly formed Royal Foundation of William, Harry and Catherine. And with the Olympics on the horizon in 2012, they knew they wanted to do something for the young people, but they also wanted to include sport. So we had that blank piece of paper moment of crap, got to go actually do this now. We've got to put something in place. And we knew very quickly, people like Mark Curtin, and we brought the creative development guys in, we got some real people round tables, but critically, and I'd like to think that this what gives us our credence and our, acceptance in our sector is that this was built by coaches from the ground up. So this was what do our young people need, but what do we as coaches want from our assistant coaches? And we knew that it had to be long term. We couldn't do just another 12-week program. We couldn't do certificate collecting. We needed to change the literal trajectory of those young people so that they could not be ignored if they then go in front of another employer at the end of the journey. So we knew apprenticeships would do that. 12 months at least of shaping and developing and keeping them, safe and protected at least, while giving them education and experiences. And that actually we couldn't do it in the traditional model. There's no point sending our guys to college a day a week. We have to tutor them in the field. We have to work with them in the field. We have to give them as many different sports and experiences. And let's create really good community coaches first, technical coaches second. It sounds almost something that everybody's doing now, but absolutely at the time, we were really bucking the trend around what an apprenticeship and community sports coaching arguably looked like. And so, we got to launch in July 2012, and it just kickstarted the madness that you see now.
Loads of things I want to pick out from that, but what were you talking, just because we've just mentioned it, in terms of the way the program was developed, like for coaches, like by the coaching fraternity, if you like. From a qualification point of view, I guess 2012 apprenticeships looked pretty standard frameworks, weren't they, at that point?
Yeah.
How was it something that you kind of took that framework and built on top of it? And then maybe recently as well, last year, obviously all those trailblazers with the employers started to come to fruition, and we've got the new calls coming in. But back then in 2012, was it purely, what would it be, activity leadership apprenticeship with the kind of wraparound enrichment on it? What would the call look like?
Yeah, I'm impressed with your knowledge. Well done, James. It was indeed the activity leadership. I hope I'm not being disrespectful, but I can only speak from my experiences. We took a dross qualification and played the game, essentially. That was the qualification at the time that for so many providers was just a tick box exercise. And the wraparound piece was, if you were lucky, they maybe got one national governing body type qualification and that was it. So it's fine. Look, it worked for a lot of people. But again, because of the nature of the young people that we were working with, we just didn't want to accept that. And we didn't want to do a tick box exercise. We wanted staff. We wanted good quality coaches that could see, even if they didn't want to have a career in coaching, that there was still other opportunities and things within the sector that they could go on to do. And that's why the beauty of Greenhouse being that you had, at that time, I think there was 14 different sports. So, myself as a head coach for athletics, we have basketball coaches, table tennis coaches, football coaches, all these guys and girls that we brought together and said, look, you might be a table tennis coach. You're going to get this activity leadership framework. We're going to give you your table tennis qualifications, but we're also going to give you basketball and football and all these other quals that mean you're going to be one hell of a multi-sports coach. But we're also going to train you on social media, and we're going to train you on business acumen and all these different things. And particularly now as we move through, to your point, the Trailblazer was a brilliant moment for us where we could really feed into that and start to build a qualification that we wanted rather than just using something. We could actually have something that we can feel really proud of, which is ultimately now the community activator coach, and still build around it. I think, for us, that was absolutely game changing. But certainly we were the first in the sector to start bringing tutors into the field, not putting them into college. You don't learn about being a coach in a classroom anyway, really trying to support their learning practically, and then building these different sports. And then what's gone on to now be different employers around the table as a consortium, so that you really reflect the local needs and the needs of that group as well.
Okay, back then, in terms of the program, so the program sitting within Greenhouse, funded by, was it funded by the Royal Foundation, or was it funded
by the Royal Foundation?
Right, okay.
Yeah. To help support obviously the salary cost that an apprenticeship incurs, and then obviously the team that were kind of around it. So back then, almost pretty much fully funded by the Royal Foundation, with this model of, look, if it works, we're going to slowly step away. At which point you need to find your own funding, and it needs to generate its own revenues and stuff again, which we've since gone on to do. But absolutely, those pilot programs initially were funded purely by the Royal Foundation, but then when we showed that it had grown, and I'd led on that London program, I was tutoring and mentoring on that program, helped advise the Glasgow and the Wales programs that then set up in 2014 and 2015. By that time, we'd got essentially 3 pilot programs in 3 different countries, showing that the concept and the model could work regardless of what qual you put in there and what employer it was. So then in 2015, the green light was given by the Royal Foundation to really own it and scale it up. And that's when I came and then joined the Royal Foundation full time to scale it across the country and bring in the multi-employer consortium model.
Touching on the, the model, employers are obviously taking on the young people, employing them from the employment side. But in terms of the training side, is that something you were delivering, centrally, you guys, the tutors on the calls?
So engage. I think, and again, that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions about Coach Core. I mean, we aren't the training provider, and we're not an employer of apprentices. We are essentially a glorified grant-giving convener. So we're bringing all of the right people round the respective local table. So, our main training provider at present is Lifetime Training. So it's an understanding with them, certainly, in the early days, of this isn't going to be delivered in the normal way. We want you to tell us what it costs to salary a tutor full-time for each program, or at least across 2 programs, but their caseload is purely with Coach Core. We want them there next to the businesses and next to the young people, not just once a week, see you next Monday type thing. So that's what was very different about how we set it up and run things over the year. And I think, they say imitation's the biggest form of flattery. We're now seeing other providers doing that, and genuinely could not be happier about it. It's brilliant that others are starting to really embrace and understand that separation between being an employer for 4 days a week and then we'll see you next week because off you go to do your 1 day of education. That's what's wrong with apprenticeships. They have to be entwined, and they have to be, embrace each other. Otherwise, it simply creates a poor experience for the learner, but you also don't get as much value as you should as an employer either.
Yeah, exactly. It's probably illustrating that value to the employer as well. They need to be the learners with them most of the time. They need to be providing, obviously you got the tutor from your side and your training provider partners, but that mentorship from the employer and having role models in there and supervisors or whoever it be is also key, I'm assuming.
100%. And that, again, certainly in a Coach Core model, that's where we're slightly different. We are asking those employers to not target A to Cers. And obviously that's slightly fluffy, but that's purposely because we recognise that there are A to Cers that perhaps still have some issues in their backgrounds and their past that they need to overcome. But we will work with those employers to basically say, look, we want you to target young people that need this opportunity the most. But we also accept that there is going to be a little bit of challenge around supporting them, potentially in the early days. So that's where we will then fundraise on their behalf to help support some of those costs. So the 10 to 12 grand that it might cost to have an apprentice across 15 months on a level 2, we can provide a grant, of 3.5K or something like that basically helps offset some of that. But critically, it allows us to then work with those employers and set certain parameters. linked to that funding. And to your point, James, one of the big things is us saying, as part of our due diligence, who is going to be the person shaping this young person? Have they got experience of working with young people in challenge? What are the hours and the time that they're going to dedicate to checking in on that person, setting them schemes of work, so that it doesn't just become someone seen as making the tea, putting the cones out. We want them to really understand that if you invest time and funding into this in the early stages, you're going to get someone unbelievable. And obviously now, as you opened with, we're going to be 10 years soon, nearly 50 programs that we've run. We've got case studies of people coming out of our ears that, have started on a program. I'll see how we go with this young person. We might only do 1 year, and now that person's 5 years into a job with them, and, opened up a whole new market and a way of working for them. So yeah, it's always rewarding.
One thing for me springs to mind is that it's got to be difficult. Obviously, I know you're looking at working with young people who have that challenge background, or the difficulties and challenges in their life. It's how do you approach if you have someone who potentially doesn't have those challenges but just looks at the program and thinks, this is amazing, I don't want to go to uni, I want to be part of this, and I want to get placed on the coach carpet. What's the kind of, entry criteria? Because it's going to be difficult to sift those. You've got someone who's super passionate, maybe don't have the challenge, but yeah, I'm just curious on that one.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think that's one that we literally, sorry for stock answer, but we take it case by case, because as you say, there's a number of things that factor into it. Again, we do a screening process, so there's some tangibles. There's a screening process, so anybody that claims to have or not have qualifications will know, claims to have not have a criminal conviction will know. So there's all these kinds of different things that we can do to put that element in place. But kind of more to your question, if we get someone that just comes along, which is increasing now, particularly in current climate with youth unemployment as it is, just saying, look, I wouldn't deem myself someone in an area of challenge or whatever, but I really want to do this. This is where we then take it back to the employers, because it has to be right for the employers. We do not place apprentices with employers. This is employer-led. They need to feel comfortable about who they're hiring. The only thing that we insist on is that where the work takes place is in an area of disadvantage, because for us, it's also an important factor that there's a ripple effect here, that this isn't just about changing the life of, as you mentioned when you opened up, 700 young people. It's the fact that we've, hopefully positively impacted tens of thousands of kids and participants across that time. So long as that employer can say, look, I've got James over here, he's not your stereotypical coach core, but he really wants to get his hands dirty, he really wants to come in. University is definitely not for him. We'll say fine, so long as what the work that James is doing in the community is in the areas that need it most as well. So there has to be a bit of a trade-off there, because, apologies if this sounds a bit crass, but we're not here to train up David Lloyd and, Virgin's next staff members. They're going to be fine. There'll be plenty of people for them. We're here, if they end up going into a job like that, so be it. But the start point needs to either be young people that are facing a bit of challenge or don't know their right career pathway, and or working in an area of challenge.
Yeah, for sure. Look, those, like you said, maybe not the copycat schemes and stuff, but the trend in the industry is moving towards that more practical, fit for purpose vocational training, which, will pick up the David Lloyd employers, Virgin, etc. Quick question on, I know you officially kind of launched as a standalone foundation. It's 2020, so just at the start of the pandemic, I'm assuming. Yeah, planned it out nicely. What was the idea around that? Just because, was it just that the program had grown so large within the Royal Foundation that you thought, right, it's actually, we should be doing this standalone?
Yeah, so again, 2015, when the decision was made to see whether it could be something scalable, I was very fortunate that when I joined the Royal Foundation, I was essentially given the keys to the car and to drive it wherever I liked, with the only parameter being that they wanted to see there was a certain amount of money available, and they wanted to see that there would be growth. 3 things that I wanted to do very quickly. I realized I'd probably got 3 years as tops to show that. So I requested that I wanted most of that money front loaded. So if it was available, I wanted it front loaded so that we could prove the concept, run through at least, one cycle in each area and get the data to show that it worked. I then wanted to bring in, as I said before, not just single employers, that we would bolt these other employers around to show that this was something in demand, and have obviously a training provider running through it and all of that kind of stuff. But the third thing, again, for someone that was raised in the West Country, essentially, but has that lens on London, my father's, as I mentioned, Geordie, so know the world and background in Newcastle. There's always been, certainly at the time, that typical, well, it might work in London, but it won't work here. And it might work in Manchester, but it won't work here. So I purposely wanted to spread the geographic net for the 10 programs that we ended up launching to show that it could. And so we get to the end of 2018, and exactly as you've kind of alluded to there, James, we just got to a point where the foundation, its model and its ethos of being is that it doesn't want other charities establishing itself needlessly. So they will prove a concept, and if it was a project or a program that's really worked, but it's done its purpose, they wind it down. They either then gift it to somebody else to continue the work. So a little bit like the Heads Together stuff, that's now sitting with Mind and things like that. Or it flies the nest to become its own thing. It becomes too big. So think of Invictus games and stuff like that. We thankfully fell into the latter category. We could show that we were in demand. It worked across the country. There were still the same issues facing young people. And so in 2018, the decision was made for us to fly the nest and become a standalone charity. And yeah, albeit slightly earlier than we anticipated, we jumped ship and set up on the 1st of April 2020. So yeah, cracking time to do that.
Yeah, and I was normally ask about challenges. Obviously the pandemic would have been huge, but from a day-to-day operational leadership point of view, what would you say your kind of recurring challenges are?
So without getting too heavy into this, but essentially the original plan was that Coach Core would have another 3 years. So 3 years of pilot, 3 years of scale, taking us from 2012 to 2018. And then essentially Coach Core would have 3 years to prepare for life as an independent charity, because again, as I'm sure you appreciate, that includes not just growing programs, continuing to grow the programs, but it's attracting your own funding, your own supporters, addressing capacity, all of those kind of things that would allow us to take out what is now £1 million charity safely and in a way that allowed us to grow for reasons that are fairly in the newspaper. Obviously 2019 wasn't a great year and there was a lot of challenges in the Royal Foundation, so it was essentially made clear to us that we needed to embark upon that journey earlier. So as ever with my glass half full, we essentially got what we wanted earlier, which was great. The challenge being that jumping ship essentially inside 12-18 months instead of 3 years meant that we've faced a standing start on fundraising conversations. The capacity, we jumped ship with 3 staff. We've only got 8 still now, so we're very small in terms of how big we are. And again, I think that's a big surprise to some people. So the current sort of short-term stuff is addressing some of that and trying to turbocharge some of that, because perversely thinking, okay, cool, we've navigated 2019, it can't get any worse than that. And then walking into COVID for someone who was also having huge issues about what a CEO looks like. And am I that person? I'm a lad from council estate that's wearing a tracksuit most of my time. Like, I didn't go to business school and all these different things that I assumed a CEO would need. So yeah, having to navigate a lot of that baptism of fire in the first 12-18 months, certainly Coach Core was a challenge. But for us now, as with any charity, it's a real challenge to get fundraising, to make yourself stand out, to continue on the journey. And yet the seesaw has tipped so much in terms of demand. I mean, we could triple Coach Core's portfolio if we really wanted to. It's just now finding the team and the funding to do that in a way that doesn't stretch us or kill the charity. We've got to make sure that we stick around for the long term.
And in terms of funding, it's an interesting one into like how you actually, I guess a couple of questions, how you actually funded, but also I'm assuming going into COVID, so many of those funding streams that you might have tapped into kind of changed to survival funding, like all the sports type core sports funding pots seem to be flipping to, can we like support all the grassroots clubs in need, etc., COVID relief, COVID recovery. Is that kind of, I'm assuming it has impacted you, but how has it impacted and what type of funding do you normally go for and the model that you look for?
So, I'll take that question first. So essentially we're, again, establishing how we operate at the moment, but we've had fantastic support from Sport England. And I don't mean simply financially. We were in the middle and coming towards the end of a deal in any case. But we've had superb, they really showed themselves to be a partner as much as a funder. And what I mean by that is that, they made their stuff available. We were able to sort of talk things through. I'm extremely proud of how we responded, because we jumped ship with, a decent pot to establish the first year. And I quickly came to the conclusion and decision that we shouldn't furlough staff. We've not got many staff anyway, but our young people need us now more than ever. Coaching is drying up. Their employment is at risk. So we, cliche word now, I know, but we pivoted and we got so much of our content out online. We were basically just there as an anchor point for them throughout that whole process. And we approached Sport England to say, look, you're about to be hit by any number of our 200 odd employers asking for funding. How about we become a bit of a frontline filter triage service, you give us a pot to distribute on your behalf and we can do some of that work. So again, just little things like that. I think we held ourselves in really good stead. We supported our employers as much as we supported our young people. And it's really, I'd like to think, helped now at the next stage of development with Sport England, the plans that we've got for the future. It's really going to help with that second agreement that we'll have with them. So they are still a major part of what we do. We were fortunate that 2 corporates wanted to come across with us from the Royal Foundation. So we've curated and worked with them, and now hopefully, looking to attract some other corporates. That is definitely the trickiest part, as you said. They've frozen funding or they've doubled down on support rightly for their existing charities, which is great, but it makes it hard for you to knock on the door now. The Trust and Foundation funding that's out there has been a real lifeline for us over the past sort of 12 to 18 months. And then the last kind of group that we have are these major donors that, again, we didn't leave with many, but we've left with, a couple that have continued to support us through thick and thin. So I'd like to think we've got a decent sort of split of funding streams, but it's definitely one that we want to, improve upon, just simply so that we can offer Coach Core to more people, in the future.
Right, and it normally ask you about kind of vision and stuff like that. I know you might be curtailed a little bit over the last 2 years in terms of your plans when you looked at rolling out. But what does the program look like for the next kind of 3 years out? If you're doing that type of cycle, is it just kind of growth in geographical areas, or what's the plan on that side?
So, yeah, I mean, there is no denying we had to press pause on a number of things that we wanted to do. But again, I think we've actually grown through COVID still. So we've actually added, we left the Royal Foundation with 13 programs and we've got 17 now. So we've actually grown to 4 new areas while we were there. And we felt that we'd made those promises, we'd made those commitments to those partners and those areas, that we had to see that through. So we really want to ensure that, as ever with the ethos of us, it's not about setting up a program just to get an extra number on the board and walking away from it. We're wanting to make sure that those guys stay sustainable and they keep running programs over and over and over. So, London, program 1 in the unsexiest way is still just as important to us as program 17, which happens to be, Sussex. So we do want to grow a little bit more geographically for sure, but we absolutely want to start spreading our wings, and we already have done, to offer level 3. So there's starting to be a real flow through. So someone could potentially be on a Coach Core journey for, 3 years now. We've also started getting interest from other sectors, which has been really encouraging. So the arts sector have been in touch about the Coach Core model and how we do things. And actually, is there a way there? Because there's some physical activity in things like, the circus and dance and all these different things. So yeah, for us, we released our strategy last year. And as I say, hopefully the growth is not just in terms of the number of areas that we'll go to, but actually the type of offer that we can bring now. So we've still got really ambitious plans to keep growing. And if I have my way, we'll just keep throwing more money at it and go as far and as wide as we can.
Just, I guess, change lanes a little bit, just in terms of your approach to, not necessarily Coach Core, but your personal approach, I guess, to business and leadership. Have you kind of developed any philosophies or kind of, I guess, working practices through your time, like leading? And you touched on kind of that, maybe that imposter syndrome that everyone goes through in terms of CEO. What does that look like? Yeah, I'm just curious on your approach around that.
I think, again, the things around luck and design, I think we're really, really fortunate in our sector that if you have come from a coaching background, I would argue you're halfway there to being a really strong leader anyway, because you understand people and you understand motivation and learner journeys and all of those things that you can dial into any business leadership podcast or course or anything. And that is always a prevalent talking point. And I think for me, again, cliche, all of my staff will know I never ask them to do something that I wouldn't do. I firmly believe, it's an awful expression, I know, but I firmly believe that a fish rots from the head. So if you're not modeling behaviors and you're not including your staff and you're not making them feel valued, through whatever means that is, I just feel that you cannot authentically lead an organization. So actually the challenge for myself and for a lot of people is how to start being better at things then, like delegating and moving away to create that sense of ownership amongst your team, so that you're not always doing and being there and, fronting things up and stuff. So that's been a decent learning curve for me, actually, is handing those responsibilities over to others, having that trust in them that they will do it better than I can. So that's been, I would say, kind of one thing. I think the other big thing for me was I have come full circle somewhat now when I really reflect on this, and I'll happily share when, obviously, walking into COVID, working 14 to 16-hour days every single day, trying to keep the charity afloat, working through those first sort of 3 to 6 months of lockdown, I really felt myself going under. I really started to feel that pressure. And I just remember one day, clear as a bell, I just, as ever with me, still with my athlete head on, I went, right, I'm going out for a bike ride. I need to sort through the 1,000 things that are going through my head, and I just need to plow through it. And that's my escapism, to go do it. And it occurred to me on that ride that I'm doing everything that I tell myself as an athlete not to do in my professional life. So I'm looking at all the things I can't control and getting stressed about those things. And I don't do that as an athlete. So why am I doing this in my professional life? And I came home, and granted it was a back of a fag packet list at that time, but what are the things we can control? And actually, let's just do those bloody well. And that's what led us to do, some of the programs around how we shifted things online and the support mechanism and function that we did. So that for me was also a really affirming moment around, there's so many things in business and certainly if you're looking at expansion or periods of tough times, that simple concept of what are the things that we can do well and we can really control, and what are the things that are completely out of our control, and therefore we just can't pay any mind to it. We've got to focus on the things that we can do. So I think that was, a major thing for me, was that moment. And since that day, I've really tried to stick to that and encourage that through my staff, not to kind of get hung up on the stuff that feels slightly overwhelming, but is it something you can do something about or not? Simple as that.
Yeah, definitely. It's transferable as well. You can take that into any aspect of your life and probably feel better and deal with situations better. So yeah, I'd love that one. You touched on it there in terms of, I guess, going on that bike ride for a bit of de-stress and decompress. And I'm assuming you're still putting the miles in every week. Do you have any other habits that kind of keep you on top form as a leader?
I think a big thing in our sector, but genuinely only my opinion here, but I think authenticity is something that consciously or subconsciously really runs through our sector. I think I am fortunate that I get to put my foot into conversations because of the fact that I've been there, done it. But I realized that was starting to become quite tired. I have been there and I've done it, but I'm not doing it. And one of those moments through lockdown was that I realized I haven't had my own group for 5 years. I haven't coached and worked full time. I've been helping out sessions and doing, coaching, developer sessions, whatever. But I've not had my own group of athletes or whatever for a little while. And so that lockdown, that first, year of COVID, gave me the perfect opportunity to say, well, I'm not traveling. I can't blame it on that anymore. I'm not going anywhere. And I think I need this more than anybody. So my daughters are getting older now. When one's going to be 9, one's going to be 7 this year. And I thought, well, they're starting to take an interest in athletics. I'm only going to go up and watch them anyway. So I may as well do it. And I know we've got a waiting list. So I've started coaching again for the past 2 years. And it's really helped me refocus again on what are the needs of coaches, what are the needs of young people, bringing that through. And as I say, I've kind of come full circle on that. And it really helps me keep that perspective, but also have that little bit of authenticity, because I'm still out there on freezing cold January nights, coaching my group of athletes, doing cross country with them, all those kinds of different things. So I think there's that bit. And again, we touched upon this at the beginning. Yes, I'm still absolutely trying to still push on and run and compete at half decent level or whatever, but it's the structure of an athlete. I don't mind early mornings. I don't mind getting it done. I don't mind making sure that my life is fully sort of structured and rigid and blocked, but if it bends and it moves, then it's fine, as long as it's done by the end of the week. So all those kinds of different things, I think I've really come full circle, and actually understanding that the power of what I do in my personal life has a massive influence on my professional life. And you lead by doing, and I think that's hopefully rubs off on some of the team.
Last question for me, Gary. I really appreciate you spending so much time with us today. If you could go back, normally I ask 1 or 2 questions, this is a reflective one, and you kind of answered my other question about, normally I'd ask you who you had to become to be CEO leader, but give us a fantastic answer just then. But in terms of yourself, if you could go back and give yourself some advice, back when you started, when you were coming out of uni, etc., what advice would that be, starting out into our sector? It might be something that you give the participants on a Coach Core program now, but is it like one kind of nugget that you'd tell yourself?
Again, I wish someone had shown me apprenticeships back then. It makes me such a vocal advocate of apprenticeships now, because I wish someone had told me about that back then. I would not have gone to university. I loved my time there. It was brilliant. It taught me so much. I've made friends that, I still consider my best friends today. I grew as a person, all those kinds of different things. But actually, I would have been so much better suited to an apprenticeship. And I think, again, that lends itself to that kind of authenticity piece. I've always had that battle around, am I what other people want me to be? Am I doing the best that I can? Am I really, who I say I am? All those kinds of things that I think comes from those kind of early childhood experiences. And right through to obviously even the CEO stuff, if I could go back 2 years and tell myself what I've learned now, that there is no CEO. It doesn't exist. There's no course, there's no book. It's the same as parenting. If anyone tells you they've got the best guide to parenting, that's the person to avoid, right? It's just
there's never a good time to yeah, exactly.
And exactly, there's never a good time to be a parent, all those kinds of different things. But you make it work around you. You understand what are the strengths that you bring. But critically, again, I got a fantastic chairman, and all those kind of doubts, if I didn't say it explicitly, he picked up on them. And he just said, look, write down the things that scare you the most. Is it that you're going to be in charge of the finance? Is it that you're just terrified that the charity would go under because you've not led before? Write down the biggest things that you're scared about. And then we can put people around you that take care of that. So I think, for anybody embarking on a new challenge, even if that's from a project to launching an entire new business, I think it's just understand what you do really well, embrace that, shout about that, feel passionate about that. And then the things that you don't well, just put in plan a place to either improve on that or bring in people that can support you with that. And I just think if I'd have told myself that even 2 years ago, I probably would have had so much more of a less stressful experience. Granted, it wasn't the nicest time, but it would have been less stressful if I'd have understood that fully, I think.
Yeah, appreciate you sharing that and being so transparent all the way through today. So Gary, thanks so much for your time. It's been a great episode. I'm sure all of our listeners are going to take a lot away from it.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at dryphase.podcast@coordinate.cloud, tweet us at coordinatesport, or follow us on Instagram at coordinate_sports, or on my account at James_ventures. This episode was produced by Nancy Kwamboka, with support from Claire Goodchild and Lola Small, with special thanks to Rochelle. I'm James Moore, and you've been listening to The Drive Phase from Coordinate Sport.